you get to know people in this line of work, and you get to know them through the interview process, not personally, but just through their intellect and what they bring to a conversation. Laurie Levenson is one of those. She's a professor at Loyola Law School, a former federal prosecutor, I might point out, and she's good enough to give us some time today. Laurie, Professor, good to have you coming down the road with us.
Joel, call me Laurie, and I am delighted to be here.
I want to talk a little bit about this one-year anniversary of, and I'm not going to change the verbiage. I'm going to say insurrection because all you have to do is look it up in the dictionary, and it was an insurrection. It was an attempted coup of the government of our nation. On this one-year anniversary, what comes to mind for you first?
What comes to mind is how horrible what happened and what challenges we have in front of us. I mean, there's been a lot of focus on whether Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice have moved quickly enough on their prosecutions. Frankly, I think they've been amazing. I can't think of any other situation where you've had over 700 people charged and many arrested. But the real problem is not just these cases. It's the people out there who are still following Trump and believing the big lie and could do it again.
There are many of us who believe this is three tiers, and you as a prosecutor can tell me whether or not you agree with this. There's the outer tier, which is the we got them riled up, we sent them to the Capitol, and then you see what they did when they're causing individuals to commit suicide, when they're causing individuals to have heart attacks, and when they're bludgeoning law enforcement officers with an American flag. That's that tier, the gullible tier. That's my words, not yours. Then there's that tier in the middle, the tier that's used as an organizational tool. If we tell these guys to do it, they'll get them to D.C. We have some of that here in North Dakota, quite frankly. We have a member of the media in North Dakota that spun all of that carried that message to fill up the buses. Then, in my opinion, you have the individuals that put the plan together, not the least of which was the President of the United States himself. I want to know what you think about my theory, if you think that's true.
Well, I think your theory is classic criminal law and conspiracy that I teach in my classes, which is you've got people who are at the core. And the people who are out there inflicting the violence, we can all say they've crossed the line. But it's harder for people to look at the enablers behind the scene and see what their role and responsibility is. And our focus very much should be on what their intent was, what was in their head, what was the purpose, not so much as to whether they were on the spot. And it is time for people to take responsibility. If it's not in the court system, it's outside it. Sort of re-examining and saying, my words matter. What I call people to do could lead to this type of result.
So you're a former federal prosecutor. You know what it's like to be an individual that decides to bring charges, that individual that knows what it's like to make someone pay for what they did, for lack of a better way of putting it. Do you see a scenario where those closest to the president and the president himself legally could be held accountable?
Possibly. But I'm actually one of those people who say, let's be careful. Let's investigate this matter fully. That's what they're trying to do. Question everybody involved, and that's why it's taking so long. But if we find out that Trump was involved in the organizing, that he knew that there was be violence, or even during the violence, he basically didn't care and didn't step in and use his powers to stop it, there could be criminal exposure. But I think that's a very important decision we make after we work our way up the ladder to talk to the people closest to him.
With Senator Smith, before we were able to join you, we had a conversation about the public itself and whether or not word gets out. One of the most telling things to me, which is what's coming out of that January 6th committee investigating this, was the role that Sean Hannity from Fox News played in all of this. And so if there's a connecting of America, if there's a getting past this partisanship that plays out in the media where you buy your news, if there is that, I'm not sure how you accomplish it when one of the most watched hosts on one of the most watched networks actually is helping to orchestrate it and conversing with the individuals that are behind it. And I'm curious your take on that.
Well, we have this great tradition of the First Amendment in our country, but we also have responsibility. And I'm always wondering, for those people who are now being charged and convicted and going to prison, coming in and saying, I believe the big lie, whether they might be the best spokespersons to speak back to these individuals and say, you are lying, and you're not just lying, you're letting other people do the time and be in harm's way for what you're saying. It's going to take the insiders to get that message across.
I want to talk to you a little bit about, how this plays out going forward. What happens going forward? Because you mentioned Merrick Garland a little bit ago, and being a former prosecutor yourself, you're one of the few people I hear that says he's going at the right speed. And that's incredibly interesting to me, because I, as someone who wants these people held accountable, I want him to file charges today. And so you have far more knowledge in this area. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, Joel, I think you wanted to do it right. It doesn't help to bring a bunch of charges and to arrest a lot of people and not get the convictions. And so there's really a benefit in having a prosecutor who knows how to get this job done and is using the resources he can. So I think what's happening is what he described. They are getting the low-hanging fruit. Those people are pleading out. They're not getting a lot of time, but they don't need a lot of time. And then we're going to see the trials for those who bludgeoned and cause the deaths and injuries of other people. And when that gets in front of the public, not only will it keep this issue alive, but I think people will understand more what the seriousness is.
So you're in front of your law school students. You're there. You're someone they count on to make sure that they're going to be good attorneys, that they're going to succeed in whatever their challenges are in life later on. And they raise their hand and they say, Professor, can this happen again? And if it could happen again, if your answer is yes, they're going to ask you, what can we do by rule of law to stop it? And I'm curious what you would answer to those students that would raise their hand and ask that.
Well, they are asking that, and they should ask that. We should all ask that. And the answer is, of course, it could happen again. In fact, we now know the things that we need to do. We have to focus not just on prosecuting the people who are involved in January 6th, but to continue to go after those groups, the organizations, the 3%ers, the Proud Boys, the others who continue to recruit so that there can be another January 6th. And we have to do that not just when they cross the line in criminal conduct, but these civil lawsuits as well. Don't forget, you have Capitol police officers who are suing the former president. And those cases are also rule of law, to see what type of imposition of fines or consequences there can be. So my response is we have to be educated. People have to stop just buying anything that's told them by whether it be Hannity or others. And second of all, there have to be consequences for those lawyers who went into courtrooms and argued that this was a stolen election. There have to be consequences on them. They shouldn't be practicing anymore. For those people who caused harm, they have to be sued or criminally prosecuted. We actually have to use our court system to get to the right place.
So now I'm going to take you from the classroom to the committee in the 1 minute I have left here, which you're going to say you didn't give me enough time, Joel. But should the January 6th committee be using the format of what we did in the Watergate hearings to put this out in front of the public as they question some of these key witnesses so that it isn't just them saying it, they see people say it themselves?
I think as much as possible, these should be public hearings. There are some limitations, there are some privileges they're fighting through, but this is America's fight, not the House's fight, not just our representatives. America should see it, because I do trust that once you see the truth, you have something to fight against those who have been telling you lies.
Professor Levenson, always enjoy it. I really do. I know you're busy and you give us time. So thank you for coming on.